following map details the general process of how you are enslaved at birth to become both the creditor and the debtor. Your private dominion is above this entire system, and this is where you will find your freedom, rights, and sovereignty. Now, this is where a lot of people go wrong, because when they want to become sovereign, they think it's a piece of paper. And they think they have to get the piece of paper from somewhere else. Well, that is immediately a trap. You can't get your authority from someone else. That's not how it works. It can't be given to you. What you will find in your private jurisdiction is this is where your rights are. Okay, because remember, rights come from you. You can't look them up. Because if you go looking them up, then what you're going to be doing is looking up someone else's rights, and you'll find out their privileges. Because if you say, I'll give you an example. If I say, I've got the right to freedom of speech because of the First Amendment or whatever. Well, what have I just done? I've just given away my right to free speech, and I've just entered into a jurisdiction of a corporation, and they're giving me the privilege to speak under conditions. That's what I've done. All right. So this is where people go wrong. They go looking for rights. They go looking for freedom. They go looking for sovereignty. I says, you'll never find it if you go looking for it, because it's within you. It's up to you to save yourself. So within the private, you will find this is where your rights are, because they're yours. You know, only you know what your rights are. This is where your freedom is, because freedom means you are free within your dominion. Freedom, that's where the dom comes from it. And this is where your dominion is. So your dominion is within the private, your private dominion. And this is where you will find your sovereignty. Sovereignty basically means, it's Latin, and sov is short for or a derivative of super. And super means the highest. And then reign is obviously authority. I reign within my dominion, like a king reigns in his dominion, right? So sovereign basically means superior or super, reign, highest authority there is. So that's the private. Then that's where people need to be. Now, within this jurisdiction, this is the jurisdiction is number one. This is the highest jurisdiction there is. If you're into God or religious, then you can say that God is higher than you. That's entirely up to the individual. That's their choice. If they want to believe that God exists, that's their choice. But that's the highest jurisdiction. No one else is higher than you. Now, within this jurisdiction, the all-seeing eye is blind. The all-seeing eye cannot view your private dominion. Cannot. Can't get in there. Can't touch it in any way, shape, or form, because that'd be a violation of your rights. Can't do it. Within this jurisdiction, the source of the name is you. Okay? So the name comes from me. So this is where authority comes from. Authority comes from author of. Okay? Authority, author. So I am the author of my name. I create it, I write it down. So if I write my name down on a piece of paper, that's my name. If someone else writes my name on a piece of paper, that's theirs, because they're the authors of it. They've created it. The given name, because obviously you're given names by your mother and father when you're born. Okay, so they're given to you. And of course, you've got your family name. Okay, your family name should be your dad's last name, because your dad has first title to the house. House refers to family. So the word house today might refer to bricks and mortar, but it comes from a German word, which is Hausan, which means family. When a man gets first title of his family, what he's saying is that he's the provider and protector of his wife and children, boy and girl, offspring, right? Which means that if any other man should violate that dominion, he makes the law. Which basically means I'm going to chop you up into little pieces if you even look at my wife bad. That is the ultimate authority, right? And the bureaucrats hate that. And they can't get past it because they're weasels. They're not men. So they had to create the legal system. And they trick you into this system. So the following steps operate at the national level, which operates above government, including acts and statutes, but below your private jurisdiction. Now, this map is only really going to show how debt and credit is created. At the national level, this is where mega corporations operate. Things like the United Nations, International Monetary Fund, World Health Organization, these are mega corporations and they operate here. Central banks operate mega corporations, all right? They're all corporate. Everything now within these two jurisdictions is all corporate. So the national level operates in the second jurisdiction. So it all begins with your mother being tricked into signing the first document to initiate this system, which is called the birth notification form. This is the declaration of creation. So the first document, that is the original document, declaration of creation. The way it works is within this system of commerce, one of the rules of commerce is he who creates controls. Okay, so if you create something, you have full control of it. And you have to prove this with paperwork, and it's normally a declaration of creation, which is an affidavit. And it'll be, I've created this newborn baby, or I've created the chair or the desk or whatever it is. All right, declaration of creation. That is the first original document. So the mother has become an informant and declared that she has created a new life out of wedlock, and is therefore abandoning the child for the state to collect and put into trust. This is the separation of the newborn infant from the father's protection, okay? So the way this works is when a mother signs the birth notification form, she uses her maiden name. Maiden means unmarried woman. So the husband or the man's name has been removed at this point. So the newborn baby is no longer under protection of the man. So the state comes in, and the state will create what is called a legal title. And the legal title will be called child or infant, depending on the country that you're operating in. A registrar will sign this document along with his official stamp of endorsement. So the declaration of creation is used to create a bond, or functions as a bond, which is placed into trust and is referred to as the res, R-E-S. So once that's done, the foreign situ trust or situs trust is now set up. So res is basically body of the trust. The body of the trust is the thing of value. So for a trust to operate, there has to be three things: two independent parties and something of value. So normally what's going on is what is called the splitting of the title at this point. One gets the controlling asset. Say, for example, this remote control. If someone owns the remote control, the physical remote control, they get the controlling asset of it, but they can't use it. They don't have that right. The other party has the right to use it. So they can use it, but they don't own it, and they don't have the controlling interest. So they have the user rights. User rights, controlling interest. Two parties, splitting of the title. And you can only do that if you've got a res, which is the thing of value. Once the trust is set up, a certificate of live birth is created and linked to the newly formed foreign situs trust. So certificate, okay, basically means copy of. So if you receive a certificate, that's copy of authority from a higher authority of someone else, because it's not coming from you, it's coming from them. So the certificate of live birth is created in the name of the child. This certificate can now be used to create or have access to credit within the trust. So within the trust, there's about $100 million per baby within the Western world. There is either an undisclosed executor of the trust, okay, or you are unwittingly tricked into becoming the executor, signing for new bonds and credit to be used through this trust. And we'll get into that in a little bit when we go along the map. So now the trust is set up, now the certificate of live birth is set up and the credit line is being set up, we go to HMRC. So HMRC, or His Majesty's Revenue and Customs, is essentially the tax collector for the whole world. However, the whole world is nothing more than a corporate jurisdiction you have been tricked into entering. So a lot of people think the whole world is the physical planet, like the 3D world of the planet, the land that you're walking on. No, it's not. It's a jurisdiction. This corporation controls the creation of credit and the collection of tax from the debtor within this system, and works with all central banks for each corporate country. Okay, each person who was registered at birth within the system will be issued a guardian account, with the account number being linked to their national insurance number or social security number, depending on what country you're operating within. Now, the national insurance number refers to the insurance provided by the surname is surety name. And if you find yourself being a surety for somebody, it means you are now accepting the debt. So if they default on the debt, you get to pay it. So, provided by the surname of the unsuspecting person to cover the liabilities of the national corporation at the national level. So when they call it national insurance number, what they're calling you is that you have become the insurance for the UK corporation. That's why they called it national insurance number. So it is this master file into which all your tax payments will be paid to cover the interest on the debt the government owes you. All right, so that's what your tax does. So all the tax you pay is just paying the interest on the debt, but we'll get into that a little bit further on. So I'll just touch on the bank. Say if you go into a casino, you're entering the jurisdiction of that casino, and they use poker chips, all right, plastic chips, only operate in that jurisdiction. So you'll go in there and you'll exchange money for their poker chips, and then you can operate within their jurisdiction. And this is what fiat currency is promised to pay. And this is why, if you say go on holiday, say you're living in this country, corporation, and you're using pounds, you can't spend these in Europe. They don't take these poker chips because that's a different casino. So you've got to change these and you've got to get euros so you can play in that casino. So that's what a central bank is. Monopoly money. They're literally giving you monopoly money with the name of the bank on it. So we got the master file, which is the Guardian account, and there's the sort code 083210 sort code. So now this is all set up, there is the executor. Now this system of credit has been set up at the national level. The registered persona is tricked into signing for the creation of new credit, which is within their foreign situs trust. So every time you sign for certain documents, right? So some of the ways this is done is through the following methods. So if you sign for a mortgage on a mortgage contract, you're actually acting as executor. And what you're doing is you're signing on behalf of a dead entity, because that's what an executor does. Think of a will. If your dad dies and there's a will, then normally the son acts as executor, which means that he is signing on behalf of his dead dad, if that makes sense, right? So you're signing as an executor. Now, at the national level, you'll normally be signing in blue because you are the creditor. And then when you're in the public level, you'll be signing in black because you're the debtor. So some of the ways this is done is through the following methods. So mortgages. Every time you sign for a mortgage, you're creating new credit. You're the executor. Brand new credits now being created. All loans. Direct debits, that's another one. Every time you use a direct debit, you are creating new credit. Credit cards. Every time you use a credit card, you're creating new credit. Insurance policies. Every time you take out an insurance policy. Every time you pay a fine. Every time you pay a fine, like a speeding ticket. So if you pay £1,000 in fines, they are dipping into your trust fund for at least 100,000 plus. I mean, what basically the police do is they securitize a bond before they nick you, or they nick you sort of thing, all in one go, and then they set up this securitized bond for 100,000. And as long as you accept it, the ticket, they make the 100,000. But if you don't, if you beat the speeding ticket, they have to pay it because they've created it, but you've decided not to be the surety for it. That's why the police are so violent now, because every time they write a ticket, if they don't process that ticket, then the police station has to pay it to the UK corporation. So that's why they're getting violent. So, you've got the Sesta KV Trust, which operates at the public level. In most cases, the unsuspecting person is tricked into signing for a new bond, where new promissory notes or financial certificates are created. Using the example of a mortgage, private credit is taken for the person's foreign situ trust and moved into the public, controlled by the corporate government. This credit is sent to the central bank of the corporate country, which is the Bank of England if you're operating in the UK. It is turned into promissory notes under the name of said central banks, which incurs an administration cost or stamp duty to be paid by the unwitting victim signing the mortgage contract. And in the olden days, there was literally a stamp to process it. That's why the stamp duty comes in. And then you have to pay the bank. And they're just scamming you at this point. You've got to pay the bank the administration cost of converting your private credit into their public credit. This public credit is then given to the person signing for the mortgage as a pseudo loan, because it's not a genuine loan, because you aren't actually lending anything. Remember, it's your own credit. How can you loan something you already own? If I already own this, how can I borrow it? So you're also paying the interest as well. So they get you again. So the word public has been turned into a legal title. This is where people get confused again. The new meaning referring to a private jurisdiction under the control of the government. Ergo, you have been turned into a member of the public. They're telling you. This is why people don't spot it. Remember, if they say you're a member of something, that requires membership. Anything with ship on the end is maritime law. That gives you a clue straight away. Oh, ship, maritime law. If you hear the word ship, it means what you're doing is you're boarding a vessel. And if you're boarding the vessel, then that vessel is acting like a contract. And that vessel has a set of rules, and there's a captain. So if you're going to board this vessel, you should make sure, well, are you a crewman or are you the captain? And most of the time, you'll find out you're the crewman and you've got to do as you're told. So public is, in fact, private. So state public actually means private. It's a legal title. So when they say member of the public, it means you're acting within a jurisdiction of the public, which is jurisdiction number 3. This is where the debtor lives. So this is where the debtor's name, the all caps name, and the surname operate. So the Bank of England creates it. This funds government. So the government is funded. This creates the national debt. So you've got the national debt. The corporate government has access to the registered person's private credit through the STKV Trust and uses said credit to fund its corporate costs. It's a corporation. And at the minute, it's running at about £5,000 per second. That's what the government's operating at. That's what they spend. However, because the corporate government has used the credit from the foreign situs trust, namely yours, operating at the national level, it is now in debt to said national trust and must pay this credit back. So if you can follow the path from the beginning all the way to where the national debt is, so you've got the Declaration of Creation, so you've got the foreign situs trust, that's the creditor. Then you follow this path, HMRC, Bank of England, master file, the executor, credit, STKV Trust, Bank of England again, government funding, national debt. So the national debt is the debt that it owes the foreign situs trust, all of ours. And there's what, 68 million persons living in the UK corporation, all right? So that's 68 million foreign situs trusts that the government has access to. So that's what the national debt is. They have to pay us back. It is our credit. But because the corporate government has used the credit from the foreign situs trust operating at the national level, it is now in debt to said the national trust and must pay it back. But the people hiding behind the corporate veil of government, remember, government is a corporation, it's a legal fiction. People are doing this. They're hiding behind the legal fiction government. They do not want to pay this back because they can't. The government does not make any money. It's a corporation that doesn't sell anything. It doesn't make a product. It doesn't make anything at all. It's just using credit, 100%. That's all. There's no way it can pay it back. So the national debt or debt to the nation is what the corporate government owe the people, but instead of paying them back, the people are tricked into paying once again. And this is where the birth certificate comes into play. This is the debtor. The birth certificate is actually referring to the birth of a new corporation that will become the debtor to all the credit the government spends. The birth certificate operates at the lowest jurisdiction, which is called the public, jurisdiction number 3. Within this jurisdiction, people, or more accurately, just the birth certificate, because it's not us, the living, breathing, we've been tricked into accepting the birth certificate. And they're controlled through government, democracy, access statutes, the police, fiat currency, and community. There's others. I only listed a few, otherwise the list will go on and on. But they're just a few of the points that are used to control the debtor, the birth certificate. At this point, the unwitting person has been tricked into entering the trap of this jurisdiction, because the average person believes the birth certificate is them, where they no longer have rights, privacy, or authority. All that's gone. They no longer have the right to use money, because we don't. We use promissory notes, monopoly money, poker chips, or have access to the central bank. You don't have access to the Bank of England. You only have access to high street banks, and even that's going. And you don't even access to your own credit. That's been stolen from you. How can you gain access to it? You can't at the minute. So ultimately, every person who accepts this jurisdiction becomes a pauper, because a pauper means you don't have any rights, you have no rights to property and all the rest of it, and is now the slave debtor to this whole system. So you end up paying tax from the birth certificate, and then that goes right back to HMRC, and then the whole thing starts again and going round in the circles. And as you can see, because there is the declaration of creation, that first bit, they're pumping more credit in all the time. And as they pump more credit in, there's going to be more national debt, meaning the government's got to find more ways to tax us and fine us to pay the interest on the national debt. Otherwise, this entire system collapses. And this is going to end up terrible for people, because the government is going to strip everybody's wealth, assets, and everything. It can't work forever. This is why fiat currencies only last normally 80 years, 100 years tops, because they go exponential. And what happens is there's just no money left. The people are just completely so poor, they can't be taxed anymore. Therefore, the debt can't be serviced anymore. The debt collapses. If the bonds collapse, then the fiat currency collapses. And that's the end of it. And that's why every 100 years or so, they always switch to a new world reserve currency. You know, normally countries are wiped out and decimated, and people are left starving and go, what's going on? Yeah, the bankers have stripped you of all your wealth using this system. It's a horrible, nasty trap. I mean, this is vile when you know how this system works, and we've got to put an end to it.